Hi everyone, welcome to Birthing at Home, a podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I'm a home birth mum of 2 little boys, I'm a mental health nurse, the co-creator of Homebirth Victoria, and I'm a Melbourne-based doula. If you want to learn more about me, the podcast, or my work, check out www.birthingathome.apodcast. And before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. For this month's midwife story, we hear from Beth in Queensland, who shares her story spanning over 20 years now, including her first experience attending a home birth and then her work as a midwife and eventual transition into private midwifery attending home births. We also chat about girls and women's rites of passage and her amazing Walking Emerging Woman workshops. I first met Beth almost 10 years ago now when studying midwifery, so it was beautiful to catch up and learn more about her story all of these years later. Enjoy, and don't forget to share this episode. Welcome, Beth, to Birthing at Home, a podcast.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great, thank you.
That's awesome. So, Beth, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to give our listeners a little bit of background about who you are, where you live, that kind of thing?
Sure. I'm Beth. I'm a home birth midwife on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. I trained in Victoria. Did the 2002 when direct entry midwifery first came in. And yeah, I just went pretty slow after that, having a little baby, and finally got up here in 2010. And yeah, things started to shift over the years of getting where I wanted to be, always be, was in the home birth world.
Yeah. And so how long have you been in private practice home birth sort of world for? Like a couple of years?
Yes. So 2020, I went out on my own as the primary private practicing midwife.
Yeah.
Before that, I'd been in group practice for a little bit, for a few years, going as second midwife and teaching and doing antenatal and postnatal visits. So it really tied in with the pace of my daughter and bringing her up, and
Yeah. And for the listeners who don't know, Beth was one of my lecturer tutors. What would you call yourself? What was your role?
A tutorer. Because I think if you're lecturing, and I only did it for a little while. Hey,
oh, really? Oh, my gosh. So Beth was one of the tutors for the it was the dual Bachelor of Nursing and Midwifery, and I started in 2014. So we must have met for the first time 9 or 10 years ago. But yeah, how crazy. I've also been reflecting, having you on the podcast about, studying midwifery. And I really remember, I feel like I've been trying to place it and think, do I have any pictures? But I really feel like there was something that as student midwives we were invited to, and I have a feeling it might have been in Yamundi and it was like a circle, a gathering, and student midwives were invited along, but I feel like you were there.
I wonder if it was a movie showing in Yamundi. Was it Jenny Blythe's movie or?
Now you're saying a movie, I'm thinking it was a movie. It was.
It was.
What? I'll have to
I'm trying to think now what movie it was. I think it was Jenny.
Oh my goodness. What the heck? Was she there? Or
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm connected and I didn't even know. I mean, I don't know if I spoke to her, but people talk about her and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't, oh my gosh, what the heck? But the Sunshine Coast, 2014, 2015, 2016, the place to be if you were a student midwife, I think.
Yeah.
But so going back, I guess, all the way back to you moving to Australia, your like upbringing. What was your understanding of midwifery, of birth, of pregnancy, in comparison to all of your knowledge now?
It was nothing.
Yeah.
I grew up, I was of the era, being a teenager in the 80s. No talk about periods, no talk about baby. You just went on the pill.
Yeah.
You just stopped babies coming. I did something very different in London while I was growing up. It was all in the fashion and department stores, and
Yeah.
it was all just what I'd known as a child. And but I never felt at home in England. And then I travelled quite a bit, and then I came to Australia when I was 26, and I started to settle down and just be really present in by way of who I started to find out more of who I was, and stop, playing with recreational medicine to help me just go through life, and was studying qigong and kung fu and meditating like every day. And it just kept coming, like, be a midwife, be a midwife. So I still didn't know anything about being a midwife.
Yeah.
And it's quite amazing to review it. And I remember being on the phone to a friend, and I didn't know I was going to stay here yet. I was on a year's visa, and I was just like, wouldn't it be amazing to like live somewhere like this and be a midwife? And it's like it fell out of my mouth, and then it wouldn't go away for like months.
Yeah.
And and then in 99 or 2000, I phoned the Nurses Board of New South Wales, and they said you have to be a nurse. And even then I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. I think I just want to be a midwife.
Yeah.
And they said, well, if you wait till 2002, you can apply for direct entry. And it kind of went forward like that.
Yeah.
That was the start of it.
Yeah. I don't know too much about like pre-university midwifery, but like, so prior to the introduction of, a university degree for midwifery, how did one become a midwife?
You did your nursing for 3 years, and then you did another 18 months to become a midwife. But before that, you learn on the job. There was no university.
Yeah.
Much further before that. But before direct entry, you had to do nursing.
Yeah.
And then do your midwifery. So in Australia, what they were finding was the average age of the midwife was just getting higher and higher.
Mm.
Because after 3 years of nursing, the majority of students would be like, nah, I'll just go and do that.
Wow.
We needed younger midwives.
Yeah. And so the direct entry midwifery you did in Victoria.
Yes.
Yeah. And so do you remember, because, I've reflected as well about like my own journey to entering midwifery, but like, do you remember what obviously it was a little while ago. Maybe what your ideas about midwifery were prior to starting, because you did some hospital midwifery through that journey too, yeah?
Yeah, well, it's almost like I didn't know what it was, but I knew what it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I was living in Sydney when I realised I want to be a midwife, and Sydney, New South Wales weren't going to do the direct entry, which is why I went to Victoria.
Yeah.
But I was in a cafe working, and a friend who was working there was like, oh, do you want to come? She knew the trajectory I was on, and she said, do you want to come and be at the birth? And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. So she goes, come to the classes. So I went to the Royal Women's Hospital in Sydney and went to the classes. It was an amazing teacher, Julie. And I was just blown away. And I remember after the first session, the woman, Chrissy, her name was, she said, oh, well, that's not our midwife. I was like, what do you mean? Oh, no, we won't know who our midwife is till the day. And like, I hadn't got to uni yet, but already I was like, oh, that's weird. What do you mean you won't know who you... Like, somewhere in my being, I knew that was a weird concept of not knowing your midwife. Cut to getting to uni, going on placement in my second year, like, what the... I don't want to be here, you know. And I was connecting with a whole group of alternative crew down there, amazing. And I just begged a midwife to take me to home birth, and she was adamant she wouldn't. She was like, no, I'm promised myself. And I was like, please, I can't just do hospital placement. Like, it's just, I just felt like a fish out of water being there, you know. I could do what I'm told, this, but it wasn't where my heart was. It wasn't what I thought. And she said yes and took me to home births.
So
the uni was like, you're not allowed to go, but
so your first exposure to home birth was like what, in 2003? Yeah. And what was that experience like for you?
It was like mind-blowingly, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I just went with her, and there was only one midwife at the time. Like, now we have to have two midwives for the birth.
Yeah.
It was the woman's third birth, and it was kind of bush. It was just past Eltham, Kangaroo Valley. I can't remember what it's called. But we rock up. It's a cold, pretty chilly night, and she's outside, and her beloved had dug out a hole in the floor, and put a tarp in, and that was her birth pool. It wasn't that big. And her best friend, her sissy Peru, singing woman Peru, just sung and drummed the whole way through. And I think if you know, anyone could see me, I probably had my mouth like dropped open the whole time.
Yeah.
But I felt so comfy there, and it was just amazing. And then she birthed, and I remember she like stood up at one point and shook like 2 or 3 times, like her hips. And then the baby came, like she could feel he was stuck, in quote, you know.
Yeah.
Needed to like boom, boom. And like even that I was like, whoa. I know. It was just like, and so he was born, and then her beloved carried her literally and the baby to the back of the property where he'd built this big, beautiful red tent for her to recover.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like really cool. And I drove home. I didn't drive home. I got on the train, and I remember speaking to my sister in England, and I said, I feel like I just went to the Rolls Royce of home birth. So it was like up there. I didn't know anything then. But that was my first home birth, and I just knew it was comfortable. It was where I felt to be. Yeah. Like I didn't ever feel that in the hospital.
Yeah. Well, it's such a contrast. Like they're like totally in control of, you know, their space, where like imagine you are planning your labor and birth in hospital, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to like have this, and I'm going to have like this tent, and like I'm going to have, you know, all of this in this room. And they'd be like, no, OH&S. Like, you can't have any of
the
that.
Candles out.
Like just, yeah, like the control you have over the space, depending on your birth place, I think, but people just don't really think about that. Like I recently was listening to a podcast episode from the Great Birth Rebellion about light in labour, and I think it was Mel, the midwife, who was saying that, I mean, now that I think about it, I can think of just in general, any hospital kind of does this now, but specifically like in birth suite, they have sensor lights in the bathroom. So if you're like in the bathroom, you can't turn the light off because it's on a sensor. So I was just thinking, that's like...
Well,
That's madness.
Yes, and I must admit that the hospital here, Sunshine Coast University Hospital, have really trying with home birth transfers. And I've recently transferred in, and when we arrive, all the lights are off and there's just fairy lights on everywhere.
Whoa.
And if she goes in the bathroom, we just put a torch on and face the torch to the wall.
Yeah.
So it's been really amazing. It's been a couple of times, and the couple walk in. Of course, that's not where they want to birth. It was only the home birth, and we've gone in, and they're just really. It's a game changer.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, if there was an obstetric assistance is, called on, required, the lights are going to go on. But until that moment, and the last time I transferred in, it just stayed like that the whole way.
Yeah.
She just ended up having some gas, and she just got in the bath and got into it, and the lights were off the whole time. So that's, I got to say, that's
but I mean, that goes to show that not all hospitals are created equally, and it's a choice for a hospital to, work on that. That doesn't just happen,
And then what happens is some of the midwives are viewing women birth in a very different way. It might be tiny amounts, but it is happening. Midwives will be like, wow, that was a really cool birth. It wasn't really anything, it was just, she just did it, got on with it. But because there was that feeling when she walked in and there was no emergency, it was just, very long. There was a few without going into story.
Yeah.
But it all changed when she got on the gas. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, that's because you're quite right. If a woman's transferring, when they've made such plans to birth at home, the transfer can be deeply traumatic for women. It's there's so many inner things that would come up, within those moments, but also postpartum and continuous reflections. But the hospital can make it a better process if they really want to.
Yeah. And this last couple was so ready for bright lights and loud noises, and they hadn't ever been there, but they were just like, oh wow, a really big bath, and there's all fairy lights on, and
that's beautiful. And so just pausing here, everyone, to thank the June sponsor of the podcast, which is Earthy Birth. If there is one thing that has been missing from the home birth scene, it is aesthetically pleasing birth pools. Until now. Earthy Birth is a small family-owned business, and they're proud to offer professional quality off-white birth pools made from thick eco-PVC and are designed for 40-plus uses. That's a lot of home births, guys. They also offer stunning disposable floor-length liners, uniquely designed so that they protect the whole pool and that they don't slip off into the pool. Not only that, the liners come with optional artistic designs printed on the base to make your birth space even more beautiful. Earthy Birth also stocks plenty of other home birth supplies such as hoses, tap adapters, pumps, rebozos, birth combs, fairy lights, and much more, all in gorgeous earthy tones. They offer both purchase and hire with free shipping Australia-wide for all orders over $50. Visit earthybirth.com.au today. Thanks so much, Earthy Birth, and enjoy the rest of this episode, everybody. Your journey into private practice, because I'm just trying to think of the timeline, because the 5,000 hour thing that would have come into play when you'd already have done quite a lot of hours. Is that right? I guess, filling in the gaps between, did you finish in roughly 2004, 2005?
Yeah. Well, they mucked around with the degree, so we had to work in the January. They faffed up the clinical hours, but that's another story. I know. And then so then my daughter was born in May 2005.
Yeah.
So she was my grad year, and then I got a casual position in the hospital that I'd trained in, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Because I didn't do a grad year. You didn't have to do a grad year.
Yeah.
It was, you just got a job. You were qualified. You know, I was qualified.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and then I went and worked at Box Hill Hospital for a couple of years, which was really good because they would be in teams.
Okay.
So I just knew, because my daughter was little, I knew this was all prep for what I would do.
Yeah.
I couldn't be a home birth midwife with a 1-year-old, and then or a baby, and then when she was 1, I became a single mum. So being on call was just not yet, you know. So it was like making the best of a not bad situation, just like, all right, this is for now.
Yeah.
And so I did a few years in Victoria, just part-time working in Sunshine Hospital, Box Hill Hospital, and then a bit of casual work because that was very well paid back in the day in the private hospitals. It was amazing. I was juggling. I was in fight or flight, juggling single motherhood, baby, and then so that was 2005, and then January 2010 I moved up to Queensland, just her and I.
Yeah.
And Nambour Hospital was the only hospital. And I went and got work there as a casual, and that was like going back 20, 30 years. It was just, where have I landed? Like, oh, shoot, you know. But again, I was very looked after and blessed, and ended up getting quite a lot of work in the antenatal clinic, which really helped with being a single mum and not doing shift work and not knowing anyone up here. Yeah. And then around 2016, 17, I went and worked with a group of women who were doing independent practice, and that's how I started creeping out to home birth. It was like my daughter was getting older and there was support, and I'd just go as a second, and then she was really ready. She's like, it's all right, Mama, just lock the door, or, you know, she'd be like 14. But it was funny. It never actually happened like that.
Yeah.
Like it's always been phenomenal timing.
Yeah.
Like I would either know and then she'd go to the neighbour. It was never like leaving her at 2 a.m. It was really good. It was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when I met you, that was sort of like not filler years, but like just trying to make it work with parenthood and making your way into that sort of path.
Yeah. Well, the home birth, I probably wasn't even thinking. I was deeply in fight or flight survival.
Yeah.
I just had to bring up my girl, work, and I only could work 2 days a week or 5 a fortnight. Like she didn't like it if I worked too much because there's a lot of juggling. So I was just doing that, but I always knew there was more because I'd been at home birth, and that's, you know, like if I did shifts in birth suite, I would be praying the night before. I'd be praying on my way in. Wow. I would find it so intense of the possibility of what I was going to see or have to do. Like doing all the obstetric nursey stuff it just wasn't where I thrived.
Yeah.
Like, oh, she wants a Lotus birth. You go in there, Beth. Cool. You know, like, doing water births when I hadn't quite got qualified, and just like, oh, I don't know what, she just got in and the baby came, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But, and they knew that. They treated me really well in the hospital. Like, they knew where my comfort was.
Yeah.
But as far as I don't thrive in obstetric emergencies that have been often contributed by action.
Yeah.
So I like the energy of home birth and the pace and the not doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Sitting on your hands.
Yeah. And then I think it was around 2017 I put in for how many hours, and it was quite you have to go to every place you've worked and get all your record of hours.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was a few hundred down.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have the 5,000, and that was like,
because it's got to be like 5,000 in a particular time period. Is that right?
Can't remember.
I think off the top of my head it is, but because that would make sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So and I wasn't disappointed because I just was starting to work in the group practice, and I think that was 2015. And then I just checked again a year later. So it was all very slow. It was like in increments of just looking, and then yeah, and then I checked again. I had enough hours, and then I just applied, and yeah, I got the endorsement.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you're allowed to attend as the primary midwife for home births. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Wow. What a journey. And so you have a daughter and she is like 18 or
19.
19. So I guess thinking about like your own childhood, like girlhood, initiation into womanhood compared to your daughter and you're obviously a midwife, like are there certain things that you did differently? Because I know that you do these amazing, I forget what they're called, like girlhood circles, I don't know.
Yeah.
So like how was that process? I guess I guess part of my reflection around this question is that I really feel that so many of the problems or challenges or issues or whatever name you want to put to it of the maternity system is that women just don't know their bodies. We're taught to, the education the very, 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 very minimal education I got was like how not to get pregnant. It wasn't like anything after that,
Well, you'd be pleased to know that absolutely nothing has changed in the education system. They're still getting taught absolutely nothing.
It's just bizarre.
Much to my like, what? I did a course, early 2000s, Core of Life, about teaching sex education to year 9.
Yeah.
It's written by some midwives the end of 90s. And it's actually amazing. But I couldn't, it was so hard to get it into the schools.
Yeah.
But my daughter was 11 and I wrote a workshop, Walking the Emerging Woman, and teaching them the basics of menstruation.
Yeah.
Starting their first period, or if they've already had periods, they'd come along and learn. I think, but just before I go into that, I think things are different now because of social media.
Mm-hmm.
Like women are learning more about their bodies and there's a lot more information. Like it's fantastic for that.
Yeah.
But back then, so my daughter was turning 11 and it was like in this week where I was at work and this young woman, I was in the antenatal clinic and she was 36 weeks and you got to mention a few things of preparing and got your tick list. And I said something about the cervix and she just looked at me and I said, "You don't know where your cervix is, do you?" And she went, "No." And I went, "It's okay." I went, "Most people don't." And we just chatted. Then I went home and my daughter was having a birthday and a few 11-year-olds who I've known since prep were coming over and we were hanging out and the mums had said that they'd talk to their girls, but then I started kind of asking questions and we were all really comfortable because I've known them since they were little.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, no, they don't actually know that much. And I said to them, it just was one of those things that fell out my mouth again. It sometimes happens. I was like, "If I wrote a workshop, would you come?" And they were all like, "Yeah." And that's how that happened.
Yeah.
And my daughter actually came to 2 workshops. The first 2 I did because she came again. But the first time she came, I remember I was like, "Yeah, bub, you just setting it out." And there was lots, there was about 15 girls. And I was like, "You just sit next to me." And she was like, "No." And she just sat in front of me like opposite, like 12 and 6 o'clock. I was so nervous because there's this point where I actually dress up as the reproductive system, which is meant to be secret, but she didn't know that. So I'm like, oh no, it's just going to be like ab fab. Like, I don't know, Pete, you're probably too young for that, but they're these really pissed friends in London. They made a program and the daughter's really straight and I'm just like, oh, my daughter's going to just see me dressed up as the fallopian tubes and she, because she's not auditory, which is why I do it, she actually said, "Oh, I really got it when you dressed up, Mum."
Yeah.
Whereas my friend's daughter was like, "Why did you dress up?" And so that's part of that catering, like they all learn differently.
Yeah.
But interestingly, like a few years later when her cycle started, she was just like, "I don't want anything, don't invite your mates over, don't want anything red." Like people presume that I've got this relationship with my daughter that's really a certain way because of what I teach. But she has her own personality and she has her own boundaries and she has her own, you know, she's like, no. And I'm like, it's okay, babe.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've got tears in my eyes, a period started. She's just like looking at me like, no, don't give me anything. But I know that she knows.
Yeah, and that's what's important.
So it's there. She just doesn't want the bells and whistles, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. I shared recently with like the birth attendant training I'm doing with Ria. We have like a little WhatsApp, and I shared like a picture series that you had put on your Instagram of like all of these elaborately decorated vulvas, and and you know, but you know how you've taken photos in the past, and I shared, and one of my peers in the group, she was like, I'm on the train and I'm crying, this is so beautiful. And like that's how it should be. And I think that's, yeah, isn't it crazy that we don't know about our bodies, like, and we're not taught?
And I remember one woman was like, oh, do you teach them about the moon and the tide? And I was like, no, I just teach them. I just want them to leave knowing they've got a reproductive system. There are 3 holes. One of them the blood comes out of, one of them they poop out of, and one of them... And it's really... And it sounds crass how I'm talking, but it's beautifully and it's so vulnerable for these young girls to come and listen to this woman they've never met. And I just want them to know, and we look at all the, you know, pads and tampons and cloth and cups and everything's a choice. I'm trying to like gently put in their beings, everything is a choice. You never have to use anything. You'll have to choose something because there'll be blood, and it's just very all like about their bodies, and everybody's vaginas look different or vulvas look different, and just making things okay.
Yeah.
It's okay because most of us haven't had that.
Yeah.
You know, and the pictures, the artwork, some of them like, do I have to? And I was like, just do one. And then sometimes they'll do one and then just they can do whatever they want after. But it's also the pathway. So if they are just do the reproductive, because it's up and they can see it, if they just do that and with stickers and feathers, and then that's also going into their being of understanding. It's another way in. Just, and some of them are just, well, they're all amazing, but the artwork, I would have been the one that didn't know what to do, and there's always a couple of those in the room. I'm like, oh, that would have been me. And then others just get straight into it, but it's not a competition. It's just fun, and I say that it's just another way that you'll know. It's like your digestive system, this is your reproductive system.
Yeah, and I guess more of a visualization without actually... you know, I think I've mentioned at some other point about the vulva wall or vulva art, where it's like images of how everyone's, you know, body looks different. And I think, you know, that creating your own vulva is like a representation of how like everyone looks different. And
so I was in my second year at uni when I realised that.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't been with women, so I didn't know. I'm watching all these births.
Yeah.
And I remember phoning my sister going, oh, my gosh, like everyone's vagina looks different.
Yeah.
So one of the things I teach the girls, I go, what's these? And they go, your eyes and nose and mouth. I go, right, but you all look different, but you all have the same anatomical parts, we call it. I said, your vaginas are the same.
Yeah.
You all have named parts, and there's diagrams in the pamphlets they get that they don't have to look at. I said, you don't have to look at now. You might never, or you might when you go home in private.
Yeah.
I said, but you all have the same named parts, but like all your faces are different, your vulvas, vaginas, they're all different.
Yeah.
And I want them to know it because I've seen some great documentaries and about the exhibition in Tassie, and because I didn't know that till I got older. And you know, you hear women like having surgery because they think because one of their labia is longer or their lips are bigger, like they don't realise, honestly.
Yeah.
So normal, so different. So
yeah.
But yeah, so some of the work I do with the girls, it's subliminal messages too, or you know, it's just
yeah. That's beautiful. I think I really hope that someday I will be able to do that. Because I just think it just like, it's very frustrating because it's obviously a part of our culture that you hear nothing about and then suddenly you hear everything about, like in terms of sex. Like it's, I don't know where the turning point is, but like it just, there's no like middle grey like learning. It's kind of like either you're not having sex and you're not knowing about your body, or then you are having sex and you're meant to know all of these things about your body. It's just there's a disconnect.
I think having a 19-year-old and sort of just having a little look sometimes at her Netflix listing, or even just seeing what comes up on my own, because you get to a point where you can't monitor them. And she's really cool, but there's a lot of stuff I've been surprised she's seen. It's like, okay. So some, I would say most of it is quite tasteful. It's just out there young. But it's not all porn, but then their brains are still, like, there have been conversations I've had with her. It's like your brain's still developing to actually process a lot of the information of what you might be seeing. Not that it was porn and or harsh or hard, but it's, you don't necessarily need to watch that.
I heard recently, I don't know where, but that they've done a study or something, and that, I don't know if it was boys and girls, but definitely I have in my mind boys, the average age that they're exposed to porn is 10 years old. And I'm like, so Murphy's 4, so in 6 years, like...
It could be younger if he's around someone that has a phone or has a sibling that has a phone. They only need to see something once.
Like...
But the adverts...
scary.
Even the adverts are so sexual. Like, I used to turn them off. And a couple of years ago, not that long ago, she said to me, I know why you used to turn them off. They're so sexual, Mum. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't all horror. Like, it just was, like, when you have a child, you start to see what they're seeing, and it's just like, whew. I mean, we wouldn't have I had this tiny, we didn't have a TV for years, but when we did, it would be, like, really monitored, and then it would be, like, TV adverts. Just because you can't, once they see things once, you can't take it out.
It's gone. Anyway, it's sort of a bit of a tangent there, but I just love the work that you do. And I think it's really cool and, very impactful, like generationally as well, because, like, I think, those girls grow into women and, as the red thread, I guess.
It's making their first experience not... that it's not scary or alone or they have to hide or feel shame, because that, Jane Hardwick Collins' teachings, and I understand from my own personal journey, you keep taking that through. So it's your menstrual cycle, your initiation into sex, your initiation into birth. It's like, there's a thread.
100%. I'm wearing my little red thread from a recent mother blessing that I went through. That's just a random little information thing, but every time I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah. That was actually really beautiful. I love that.
So she's going to birth soon.
It was just, I'm not sure to the listeners if you've heard of mother blessings, but it was so intentional. And like, you're constantly exposed to, like, pictures of baby showers and stuff, and it always looks like super extravagant, and, like, I've always got, like, this amazing cake and balloons and, like, whatever it is, and that's totally fine, but this was just so intimate, and, like, people were crying, and it was just, like, the energy was totally different. It was amazing, but also, like, honoring that red thread.
But then she can pull on that when she's in labour. Like, she can feel those women that held her, and it just shifting things. And it is old stuff.
Yeah.
We're just remembering,
Yeah.
it's...
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the first time I heard the red thread was in Rachel Reed's book, where she talks about the history, which, I mean, that's like a whole other thing because I could talk about that for ages, but I love the history of all of that. I guess to like finish up, Beth, like what would you say is the favourite part of home birth midwifery for you? Like what do you love the most?
I almost get teary. There are moments, and it's not always birth, like sometimes it might be an antenatal visit or a postnatal visit where often it is birth, but you come away and I'm just in so much, I say thank you. I just look up and say thank you because I can feel that I've been part of something so much bigger than myself, that there was so much benefit in how that moment, birth or what came out in pregnancy, and it's love, it's hard, but I say thank you for that I could do that I could be of service, and as blah blah as that might sound, I know it's not me. Like on the way to a birth, I'll pray, like in a healthy way to, as in it's not just me. Yeah. I'm not like, the responsibility can be quite overwhelming if I thought about it. So I'm like, please help. Please, maybe I listen. Please, So, yes, and that's with love and intention. It's not an egoic, like it needs to be a certain way. Just it's from my heart. Yeah. And so, the things about home birth midwifery are the moments that I know I'm exactly where I'm meant to be for the good of the greater picture.
Yeah.
Or community. It's that when I feel very small and the feeling is very big.
Yeah.
It's a purpose. I'm purposely living, and the impact is for the greater good of so many.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's humbling. Like I say, I feel really small, but the feeling is huge. It just goes beyond.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like how I feel about the mother blessing thing that we just talked about. Like it just, like I was there and I was one person, but the power that that's going to have is, I mean, it's like, yeah, you throw the pebble into the water and like it ripples and just.
Mm. I feel like what I do, like the ripple, is I say what I do affects the next 7 generations. And I'm such a teeny tiny piece of a humongous movie.
Yeah.
And I'm just the ripple, like you said, and I just go 7 generations. Whether it's the birth she wanted, not wanted, if there's love there and there's intent and there's honesty, even if it's different for our next birth, but that baby and that baby's ovaries, if it's a girl, and the eggs and the memory and the dun dun dun, just the memory, that is passed down. So
magic.
Did that answer your question?
It did. That's magic. Thank you so much for being a guest in the midwife series on the podcast.
Thank you for what you're doing and all the beautiful podcasts you're doing and the variation, and it's great. It's nothing better than learning from other stories. It's the storytelling.
Yeah.
It's how we learn.
Yeah, learning what's possible, and I think pretty much I learn something from every single episode that I do, even though I've heard so many stories now and will continue to hear so many stories. I get something from every person I speak to, and I think that's powerful, and I hope other listeners experience that power as well. But thank you.
Thank you, darling. See you soon.